What's up, mobile devs? I hope you're doing well. In this tutorial, we are going to build from scratch this amazing animated activity indicator. So this tutorial is not going to be just an animated tutorial, it's going to be a perfect excuse to explore the basics behind a React Native Skia. So the trick is that we are going to build the UI by relying completely on React Native Skia, and then we are going to fine-tune the animation by using Reanimated. So I really hope that you're going to enjoy this one. So here, as you can see, we have our React Native project initialized with Expo, and in this project, I've already installed React Native Skia, because of course we are going to need Skia in order to build the activity indicator UI. And then since we want to animate the activity indicator, of course, we are going to need Reanimated, which I already installed. So that said, we can already start to update the UI. So let's get rid of the text and update the background color. And right now, let's focus on creating the custom activity indicator component. So let me create the components folder, and let's define here the activity indicator.tsx file. In this file, we are just going to export for now a simple React Native view. So let's say activity indicator, and let's export a simple React Native view. And let's export also this activity indicator, which we are going to import in the main view. So here we need, of course, to import the one from the custom file and not the one from React Native. And there we go. So as you can see, nothing is changed. That's simply because this is just an empty React Native view. So the idea is to build the activity indicator UI by using Skia components. And in order to use Skia components, we always need to define a Skia Canva first. So instead of a React Native view, let's just use a Skia Canva. And the properties of this Canva are going to be very similar to the one from the React Native view. Of course, these are two completely different concepts, but we can style it in a very similar way. So let's define the width equal to 200, the height equal to 200, and the background color equal to red, just to see something. So let me reload. And there we go. So this is our Canva. Instead of using 200 and height equal to 200, let's just define the canvas size by saying canvas size equal to 200, and let's replace the width and the height with this value. So here, as you can see, TypeScript is complaining since the beginning because we need to specify the children property, which is needed for the Canva. That's because the Canva will not make sense if we don't use children's. I mean, we are just initializing a Skia Canva, so we need to use some Skia components. So the first idea is that in order to build this activity indicator, before building it, the main idea is to build actually a circle. So if you think about it, the activity indicator is nothing more than a circle with just the stroke specified, so with just the border. So let's focus on building a circle with a border, and then we are going to play with it. So to do that, let's define a circle from React Native Skia. We need to specify the center X property. Since we want to center the circle in the middle of the Canva, let's use the Canva size divided by 2. Let's specify the center Y, which is going to be identical to the center X, and then let's specify the radius equal to Canva size divided by 2, because we want to take the full available space. And there we go. So instead of using a black circle, let's specify the color equal to white. And of course, as mentioned previously, we just don't want to take we just don't want to apply a fill property. We just want to consider the border of the circle. So to do that, let's say fill, let's say style equal to stroke. The default value is fill. And here, let's increase a bit the stroke width to something like 10. So if you look closely, you can definitely see that the stroke width, half of the stroke width is going outside of our Canva. And that's because the circle radius somehow is going to be equal to the radius plus half of the stroke width. So we need to update the radius in order to fix this behavior. And in order to do that, let's say stroke width equal to 20. So let's parameterize the stroke width. And let's define the circle radius equal to the Canva size minus the stroke width divided by 2. So here you can see that we have, cursor have fixed the issue for us. So right now, I mean, it doesn't look, of course, as an activity indicator. It is too big. And here, let me just fix the stroke width. So this is definitely more acceptable. So the idea is that, of course, in order to build an activity indicator, we just don't want to consider the full circle. We just want to, let's say, split somehow the circle with a start position and an end position. So the idea is that we want to clip somehow the circle, and we want just to consider a part of the circle length. So it would be ideal to have some sort of properties like start and end property that we can apply. But unfortunately, we don't have access to these properties on the circle component. So the idea is that we can have access to these properties by using a Skia path. So the idea, let's say the plan, is to convert this circle so that into a Skia path, and then we can use the path and apply these two properties. So maybe this feels a bit abstract, but let's say that practically. So let's just comment this circle component, and let's try to achieve the same result by using a circle path. I'm going to use the useMemo hook. And here for now, let's just focus on creating an empty Skia path. So to create an empty Skia path, let's say Skia path.make, and let's just return this path. Then, of course, we want to use the path. So we need to use the path component from React Native Skia. And let's just pass the path property equal to circle path. So, of course, nothing is going to happen. That's because the circle path for now is just an empty path. But the interesting thing is that we can access a lot of functions, and we can add a lot of shapes to this path. And one of them is the circle. So let's call the add circle function. And here we can specify the center x, which is going to be equal to the canvas size divided by 2, the center y, and the radius. So here, let's say, let me just autocomplete, and we have the center y and the circle radius. By reloading, you can see that somehow we have a very similar result, but we need to add the color property, the stroke property, not the stroke, sorry, the style property equal to stroke, and the stroke width. And I mean, right now we have achieved exactly the same result that we had previously. But the interesting part is that finally we have access to the start property and to the end property. So by default, these two properties are going to be equal to 0 and 1. But if we want to play with them, we can easily say start equal to 0.3, start equal to 0.6. And you can see that this is start to look similar to an activity indicator. So let me quickly fix this stroke cap behavior. I mean, we just want to have some round behavior, and this is definitely fine. So being really honest, so far we achieved something that was very easy to achieve with React Native SVG, but we have used Skia. So the point is that right now we want actually to start to get value over Skia. And to do that, the first interesting thing that we can start to do is to apply a gradient. So if you look closely at the example that we are building, we want to build actually, we have this fancy gradient over there applied to the path. So how can we achieve the same thing? This is extremely easy in Skia. Usually what I like to do is that I like to open the Skia documentation, search for the gradients, and then at the very bottom, there is this amazing sweep gradient with some initial properties already applied to it. So I usually copy this value. Here, let me apply the sweep gradient. We want to apply the gradient to the path. So let's import sweep gradient from React Native Skia. Let's import vec from React Native Skia, and let me save. And I mean, somehow it is working, but we need to fix the center. So this vec, I mean, let's just avoid using the vec. This property here is the center property. We just need to specify the center x and the center y. So let's start the sweep gradient over there with the canvas size divided by 2 and y equal to canvas size divided by 2. And there we go. So let me remove finally this weird background color. And you can start to see what is going on. So, I mean, this way of passing the object to the center X is definitely fine, but somehow the back function was doing exactly that. So let's get back to our back function, and there we go. So, I mean, right now we are starting to get value from Skia. And there is one very interesting thing that we can do as well. So if you look here, we have some sort of blur effect applied to it. So let's try to get the same identical effect. So the idea is to use a blur mask component from React Native Skia. You have a lot of blur options, such as the blur, the backdrop blur, but I mean the blur mask will be the right one for this animation. So let's apply some blur equal to 10 and some style equal to solid. And there we go. So instead of style equal to solid, let's have a try with the others. So the inner, the outer, the normal. I mean, you have a lot of options, but of course the solid is going to be the right one. And if you look closely, you can start to notice that if we increase the blur, somehow the blur is constrained and limited by the Canva itself. So let's get back to our Canva background color. And you can see that somehow the Canva is limiting the blur effect. To be honest, we cannot do much with that because the Skia components have to be defined within a Skia Canva. But what we can, of course, do is that we can try to increase the Canva size and the blur will have more room to be applied. So in order to fix that, let's just decouple the Canva size from the circle radius, because right now the circle radius is highly dependent on the Canva size. So let's say Canva, let's say circle size equal to 64, and let's say that the circle size, the circle radius will depend on the circle size. And right now, let's just increase the Canva size, and there we go. So let's say here, just to see what we have done, let's increase, let's define the background color, and you can see that we have increased the background color. But since right now the circle radius will depend on the circle size, the circle radius is not changing. So maybe blur equal to 10 was too much. Let's say blur equal to 8. And I believe this is definitely fine. So of course, right now we are missing not the most important part, but we are missing the animation itself. So the idea is that we were able so far to build this fancy component just by using Skia, but in order to animate things, we need to use React Native Reanimated. So what do we want to do? First of all, since I want to start by animating the rotation, the idea is to wrap this Canva with an animated view, and then we are going to animate the rotation for this animated view. So let's specify animated from reanimated, and let's wrap this Canva with this animated view. So as you can see here, animated is imported from reanimated. And the idea is that we just want to update the transform property. And in detail, we want to update the rotate property. So the idea is that we are going to animate this property by 0 radians, which is, this is 0 radians, so no rotation at all, to mat 2 pi animation. So let's say 2 pi radians. And 2 pi is identical to 0 radians somehow, so nothing is changing. But of course, the idea is to animate between 0 and 2 pi. So what is going to happen is that in between, by updating this property, the activity indicator is going to rotate. So of course, in order to do a proper animation, we cannot just apply a style in this specific way. We need to define a reanimated style by using the use animated style hook from reanimated. Here, let's just take this object that we have defined and let's replace the style with this reanimated style. And there we go. So the idea is that we don't want to pass the angle, the rotation in this specific way, of course, we want to compute the rotation and we want to have a proper shared value. So the idea is that we are going to define progress shared value by using the use shared value hook. And then on the use effect, the use effect hook from React, we want to start the animation. So we want to animate the progress value to something like 2π. And we want to do that with 1 second duration. So basically what is going to happen is that when we are going to mount the activity indicator, the progress shared value is going to be updated from 0 to 2π in 1 second. And we just want to replace the value that we were passing right there with the progress.value. So here, if we reload, you can see that somehow the animation is definitely working. So if we reload again, it will work. But of course, we don't want to rotate it just once. We want to have an activity indicator which is going to rotate over and over again. And in order to support that, we can use the with repeat high order function from Reanimated. We can pass here some additional properties, such as the number of repetitions. Since we want to repeat it over and over again, the right value is -1, which means infinite. And here we don't really want the reverse, but let's say reverse equal to true, just to see how this is going to behave. So as you can see, this is pretty far from the value that we want to support. So let's say reverse equal to false. And as you can see, somehow it is working. So there is this weird effect where it is starting slow, then it is increasing the speed, then it is back to a slow animation. This is happening because by default, the easing property from with timing is equal to quadratic, so quad, if I'm not wrong. So if we want to have a regular behavior, we just need to use the easing.linear property. And as you can see, it doesn't seem that the animation is starting over and over again. It seems that we have this kind of continuous rotation, which is definitely nice. So that said, what I usually like to do is that instead of having the progress animated between 0 and 2π, I like to have one shared value, which is animated between 0 and 1. And then I like to update, let's say I like to have multiple animations depending on just one shared value. And in order to do that, of course, we are going to need to multiply the progress.value by 2π. Because right now the progress.value will be updated between 0 and 1, not anymore between 0 and 2π. So by doing that, nothing is going to change, to be honest, but this is going to be very helpful in a second. So, somehow it seems that the animation is completed, but the truth is that we are missing some very important detail. So if you look closely right there, you can see that the circle length is somehow dynamic. So in this specific case, for instance, you can see that we are just taking the 50% of the length. But if you look right there, let me check. So if you look right there, we are definitely taking more space. So the circle size is definitely, the circle length is definitely higher than how it was previously. So what we are doing over there is that we are animating the start property and the end properties of our circle path. So these properties, the start and the end, are not going to be static, are going to be dynamic, and we can animate these properties. So the truth somehow is that we are just animating the start property between 0.3 and 0.6. And as you can see, this is somehow the effect that we want to achieve. So of course here by reloading, I'm messing with the Reanimated, but of course this is just going to happen in development mode. So in order to support an animation, we can use the Reanimated values, because even if this is a Skia path, this is going to perfectly support Reanimated values. And this means that we can easily animate every Skia component just by using reanimated directly. So since we want to animate the start property, we can start to define the start animated, which is going to be a derived value, because right now, finally, we have this progress value between 0 and 1, so we can reuse over and over the same progress value to animate everything. So this means that we are going to animate the start value by using the progress value. And for instance, let's just say that for now, we just want to return the progress.value, which is going to be a value between 0 and 1 for the start as a start value. So if we reload, you can see that, of course, it isn't working as we expect, but somehow something is working. So just since I don't want to become crazy, let me just say with repeat equal to 2, and this is fine. So just to see what is going on. And as you can see, the start property has been updated between 0 and 1. So the proper way to animate this thing is to use the interpolate function. So the point is that, of course, we don't want to animate the start value between 0 and 1, but as mentioned previously, we want to use some sort of in-between values, such as 0.3 and 0.6. So you can use whatever values you want, but this just worked out pretty well for me. So let's use the interpolate function from reanimated. Let's pass this progress.value. And here we need to specify the input range and the output range. So I'm just going to keep the default for now. So if you're not familiar with the interpolate function from reanimated, I strongly recommend one of my previous tutorials about the interpolate function, and I'm going to leave the tutorial in the video description if you're interested in. But somehow the main idea is that when the whole purpose of the interpolate function is to remap a specific value to another output range. So the point is that we want that when the progress value is going to be equal to 0, the start animated value needs to be equal to some other value. So for instance, 0.3. And when the progress value is going to be equal to 1, the start animated value needs to be animated to some other value. And as mentioned previously, we want to support something like 0.6. So after all, this is nothing more than linear interpolation, but the interpolate function is pretty handy because it is supporting a linear interpolation with multiple values. So I mean, here you don't have to just use 2 values, you can use as many values as you want. And here, if we try to reload, let's actually support back the infinite repetitions. And the animation is still looking clumsy, but it is definitely better than how it was previously. So the point is that when we are going to animate between 0 and 1, the rotation will be updated between 0 and 2 pi. And it means that we are going to have a full rotation. So when we are going to have the full rotation, we just want to get back the start animated value to the initial value. So we want that when the progress value is equal to 1, let's say the start value is equal to how it was at the very beginning. Otherwise, we are going to have this weird effect. So this means that somehow this 0.6 value needs to be, remapped to another progress value. So let's say 0.5. And by doing that, you can see that everything is working perfectly. So the tutorial is really about this fancy animation, and it should be somehow completed so far, but I just want to add some very small detail over it. So I guess that this activity indicator is going to be used, of course, in cases where you need to retrieve some sort of data, so you need some asynchronous operations. And it would be ideal to have some sort of animated entering effect. So let's actually try to create this condition where you are loading something. So by default, you are not loading. Then after some milliseconds, let's say after some milliseconds, you are going to load something. So for instance, after 2 seconds, you are going to load this activity indicator. let's say activity indicator. So if it is loading, we want to show it, otherwise we don't want to. And what is going to happen right now is that the activity indicator after 2 seconds will hopefully, so after 2 seconds will appear. But as you can see, the entering animation is not that smooth. So as you probably already know, if you have followed my layout animations video, we can just fix this behavior by using this entering property from Reanimated. Let's say fade in, because feel totally free to choose all the possible options. You have a lot of options here, but I think the fade in is just going to be nice. So let's support this entering animation. And there we go. And then you will probably also need the exiting animation, and I think that the fade out animation is going to be perfect. So let's see. And as you can see, it is working perfectly. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I think that somehow this animation is a perfect excuse to explore in detail the basics of React Native Skia. So I really hope that this was helpful for you. So if you have enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and feel free to leave suggestions in the section below. So that said, hope to see you to the next one.